Oh, hello, good day to you. This is Greg Scully. I'm with 501 Commons. 501 Commons is a nonprofit that serves other nonprofits, and we are proud to also host the Give Big or Washington Gives site for year-round giving. Today, we're really excited to have Scott Marlow with us. Scott is one of our trusted providers at 501 Commons that we refer out to nonprofits. He serves nonprofits and helps them in a wide variety of ways in their website and data analysis of that information that comes on their website and so forth. And he is a marketing guru and a website guru. And I asked him if he would be willing to help us to prepare our websites for Give Big. And so today I'm really pleased to introduce Scott. He's in Spokane, Washington. Doesn't really matter where you are in the world, he can help serve you. If there's some of his services that you might need afterwards, reach out to Scott. But with that, I'm going to introduce Scott Marlow and turn it over to him. Thanks for coming today.
All right.
Go ahead, Scott.
So we're going to obviously talk about Give Big today and how to prepare your website for online fundraising. And this really, the presentation applies to any fundraising effort. We're using Give Big because one of the unique issues around it is your site might get a lot of traffic related to this particular fundraiser over a short period of time. So the story I'll share is not necessarily Give Big related, but it could be. Pre-COVID, I had a client I was working with. This is a national nonprofit. They had a number of regional chapters, and they had a fundraising lunch in the spring. So imagine you send out all your postcards, you do all your marketing, you have maybe 400 plus people at this event, and all of these people at the luncheon go to the website to make a donation, and the website crashes. And not only does it crash, but it doesn't come online during the lunch. It doesn't come online that afternoon. It stays down all day. All right. Well, the issue was that this particular client ended up exceeding their web host plan resource limits. And so the web host just turned their site off, and that can happen. So they contacted me, we rebuilt their website, they got a better hosting plan, and now they can host their fundraisers with a lot more confidence. So those are some of the things I want to cover, is how to prevent those events, how to identify those issues, and how to prevent them from happening. The vast majority of you probably won't have any issues. But if you're interested in optimizing performance, the general rule of thumb is that you want your website to load in about 2 to 3 seconds. Anything after 3 seconds is generally going to start hurting conversions, meaning people making donations, volunteering, reading content. Engagement starts to fall off after 3 seconds. All right. And generally speaking, your mobile page load times can be as much as 5 times slower than desktop. So if you're doing all your web work on your desktop computer and everything seems great, you have to remember that those mobile users are not having the same experience, particularly if they're not on a Wi-Fi connection. All right. So those of us using, say, our phones at a fundraising event where maybe there's no Wi-Fi, we're using 4G, 5G, you're gonna have a much slower experience. So we're gonna start with a little quote here from one of my favorite authors, Peter Drucker. He's a management consultant, and I like to share this quote with all my clients. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And this is not just about fundraising, this is about everything in your organization. If you're not measuring it, how do you know you can improve it? All right. So Peter Drucker has a number of books. I encourage you to read them. Many of them are older, but they're still relevant today. And it's all about performance benchmarking and doing analysis that can help you to move your organization forward, whether it's fundraising or volunteering or whatever you're focused on. All right. So where do we begin? The best place to start, and I hope all of you have Google Analytics installed for your websites, or you have some type of site statistic package. All right. And in this particular case, we're just going to look at one report today, and it's the site speed report. And if you log into analytics, this is what we call universal analytics. There'll be a behavior tab on the left. And within that behavior tab is a site speed report. All right. And when you go to the site speed report, you want to make sure you're looking at a decent date range. So for example, if your site hasn't changed since last year during GiveBIG, I might look at the month of GiveBIG, the month of April, the month of May, right? And Google will hopefully tell you roughly how fast your site loads. So what's important here is, number one, you want to make sure you have a good sample size. In this case, 337 page views. That's a good sample size. If this only said 2, 3, 4, if it was like under 10 page views, you're going to have to use a longer time frame up here to get a more accurate measurement, or we'll have to use other tools, which we'll go over later. All right. But in this case, we can see that their average page load time is under 2 seconds. That's fantastic. We're under that 3-second threshold. So at least Google's telling us we're in pretty good shape, right? The other part we can look at here is your average server response time. This is your web host. All right. So if you're hosted on GoDaddy, Bluehost, Wix, Squarespace, SiteGround, WP Engine, right? If this number gets really high, it's going to impact your page load. And the only way you can affect this time is by changing your hosting plan. All right. So these are great numbers to look at. You can also drill down and look at individual page timings. So this / is your home page. And then this is how other pages compare to your home page speed. Generally speaking, home pages are going to load slower because they generally have more content than interior page. Now, let's say in this particular case, we don't have a donate page that's in our top 10 pages. If your donate page is pulling in a donation form from a third party, like Network for Good, Click and Pledge, etc., that page load speed is going to be impacted by that third party, right? And I should, but I don't have the data on which of those donation networking platforms is faster than the others. But for example, if you're using an embedded iframe code, it can definitely impact the page load speed. And when you're trying to get as many donations over a short period of time as possible, you want those pages to be as fast as possible. All right. And then there's a speed suggestions tab here, which is really just telling you your average page load speed across those top 10 pages. And we can see here, in the case of Seattle Foundation, all of our pages are loading very quickly, with the exception of this login page. Why is that? Because that login page is pulling in third-party content that's taking longer to load. And this is not a page that, all of their stakeholders use, right? So behavior report, site speed, and again, make sure you're using at least 1 to 3 months of data so you can get a good sample size for that overview report. All right. So we are going to share some data on what makes a site slow. Generally, people think of slow websites as page size. You've heard of your home page is 2 megabytes. That's about the median size website. All right. The median is actually about 2.4. The average is around 2.1. All right. If your site is 4 megabytes, 5 megabytes, 7 megabytes, it's generally going to be slower. And if you're under these numbers, it's going to be faster. All right. And we'll get deeper into what that means later. All right. We have a couple organizations we're going to experiment with here. So I can share all these URLs after this, but you're welcome to test your own site if you'd like. So this is a report, April 10th, and this is specifically a mobile report. And what we're looking for are these nice green lines. These green lines are success. This is like go. You're doing pretty well. 1.6 seconds, 1.5 seconds, 1.2 seconds, first time to bite is what that's called. All right. Now, if we scroll down, our benchmarking number is fairly low, 69. There's room for improvement here. All right. But generally speaking, these numbers aren't awful. Now, if we click on desktop, you can see how much faster the website is on desktop. This is always the case because desktop computers have more resources. They generally have better connections and so forth. All right. So if you're on your desktop, you're not going to notice these performance issues, which is why you want to go to analytics and you want to do some mobile testing specifically. If you want a real life example of what your website's like on mobile, just use your mobile phone, turn Wi-Fi off, and reload your page and count while it loads. And if it loads in 10 seconds, you know you have a problem, right? Now, if you click on these performance numbers, it'll go down and give you a whole lot of information. I'm not going to go into detail on what all these performance opportunities and issues are. Generally speaking, JavaScript is what I consider a more decorative feature of a lot of websites. If you're loading a lot of JavaScript, a lot of WordPress plugins, a lot of features and functionalities, JavaScript is definitely going to slow down your website. All right. And that's generally going to be more towards the top of performance. All right. So these would be opportunities to potentially improve performance, generally focusing around JavaScript. All right. Google Lighthouse. Now, this is an add-on that you can add to your Chrome browser. All right, just do a search for Lighthouse. So we're going to do another test here on a different organization. And I have to do this test in Chrome. I don't always use Chrome here. We load the website. This is Pause Alliance. Got a lot of content on that homepage. Again, homepages are generally going to load slower. We are only testing the homepage right now, and we're testing for mobile. All right. And if you install this Chrome app, you can use this tool as well. It'll take a few seconds to run. So the Positive Alliance site, Lighthouse is giving it slightly slower marks. So the Google page speed tool I showed you is built around Lighthouse. Lighthouse is just giving us a little bit more information, right? So similarly, if I click on my performance, I can see specific numbers related. Time to interactive. So Lighthouse is estimating on mobile devices, the time it takes for me to be able to click anything on the homepage is 16 seconds. Now that's an estimation by Google. That may not be accurate. You'll want to check your analytics, right? But this is not a good number. We would want this number to be lower, ideally. So it's definitely a sign that there's an opportunity to improve things, all right? And we're seeing this 5.7 seconds to load most of the site. And then here's all these opportunities here, all right? Defer off-screen images just means what we call lazy loading. Have the images load after the person scrolls the website. That can speed up a website. Serving images in what they call next-gen formats. This is not always important. PNG files. All photographs on your website should be uploaded as JPEGs. If you're loading PNG files, you're creating performance issues for your website. All right, PNGs should be reserved for logos, icons, line art, illustrative work, things that are not photographs. All right. And we can see here, this website has a lot of PNG images. So those are slowing things down. All right. Again, JavaScript also contributing 6.3 seconds to that estimated mobile slowdown. And HTTP2, which doesn't often come up. This is related to your web host, all right? This is a feature that helps mobile devices load websites about 5 times faster. In my opinion, any modern web host should have this enabled. If your web host doesn't have this enabled, they're doing something wrong. And I would change hosts, all right? Now, another note, this particular feature is only available if you have an SSL certificate for your website. So in other words, your website has to be HTTPS, not HTTP. So a lot of people think of SSL certificates as being security. They are also performance oriented, right? HTTP only works under a secure connection. And again, that can have a big impact on page load time. Right? So that's Lighthouse. There's a really deep ecosystem of information in here to go through. The bottom line is you want your numbers ideally in the green. Yellow numbers may not be bad. If you see red numbers up here, you definitely have some work to do, right? And you're probably going to need help. But you can dive through here and find helpful information. Oh, I missed my. Pingdom is another tool. So we're gonna pull up a test in Pingdom here. We're gonna do the same test on the same website this time. This one can take a little bit longer to load. I like Pingdom because it shows you your information in a little bit more of a visual graph, if you will. And then I'm gonna do one more test after this. So this is a nice overview, 3.3 megabytes. The home page is about 50% bigger than the average. Most sites are only 2 megabytes. So that's going to create an issue. But this is the bigger issue. All right. Requests. Server requests are all the files that create your website. Not just HTML, but your images, your JavaScript files, your CSS files, your font files. You add all those files up. And in this case, to load this website, your browser needs to download 83 different files. Now, some of those files are really, really small, and they'll download super fast, microseconds, all right? Generally speaking, I like to see this number in the 40 to 60 range. If you see your request range up above 100, you are going to have performance issues, all right? So again, you can see here that one of their first recommendations is making fewer requests, because we know that 83 requests is a lot of requests for a phone to download on 5G. It's a lot of files, even if they're small, all right? So it's going to suggest ways, how do we remove some of those? Do we use fewer fonts? Do we have fewer features? Do we load fewer images, right? I think they've taken those other graphics away. All right, and we're going to do one more test here. So this is a site called Web Page Test. They used to be a nonprofit. I'm not sure. They were recently acquired by a company called Catchpoint. This happened last year. So I'm not sure what they're doing in the kind of open source community, but this tool is available for free. I do log in with a free account. The test location, all right? Generally, you want to try to choose a location relatively close to you. And in this case, the closest test location they have is Salt Lake City, all right? And in this case, they look like they're really backed up. So it may take us a while to run this test. So we'll just start that and maybe come back to it. Let's see if we can get it to at least start. Everybody's doing a lot of testing this morning. So we'll wait for this to come out. Usually if you log in, your tests will be prioritized. There's just a lot of people, probably because it's Monday morning and people are doing benchmark testing. All right. So it's going relatively quickly, but it's going to take a while. All right. So benchmarking tools. You have PageSpeed Insights, you have Google Lighthouse, you have Pingdom, you have Web Page Test. Those are all great tools. There's plenty other. There's, Yahoo has a tool. The bottom line is find a measuring tool that you can interpret and work with your team to identify issues, right, with Google Analytics and start to tackle those issues as you can, all right? So this was a site that I launched earlier this year for the Seattle Foundation. They originally had a site that was hosted on a CMS called Sitecore, and they didn't really like Sitecore. They wanted to switch over to WordPress. I like WordPress. I've been working with WordPress since 2010. But these performance issues and the stats I'm referring to are, related to any CMS you use, whether it's Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, et cetera. All right. So when we rebuilt their website, we wanted to make sure we paid attention to performance because web page tests showed that their mobile speed was almost 10 seconds. They had some serious performance issues. And part of that was related to the fact that they had almost a 6 megabyte homepage, right? And again, a lot of that was related to images, all right? And they had only 59 server requests, which I mentioned earlier. 40 to 60 is generally a good number, all right? But it's not just about server requests. Is the code optimized? Maybe if there's only 10 server requests, but the server request is loading so much JavaScript that the browser can't handle it, right? So this is all about web development and your choice of a CMS. When we move them over to WordPress, you can see that all of their numbers improved significantly. So their mobile speed was basically in an F range. This would have been a red Google Lighthouse mark. We got them up into a nice yellow zone, almost into green. And their desktop speed also improved significantly, right? And in their case, a lot of their visitors are desktop, but they get plenty of mobile traffic. And the end result was a mobile estimated load time of around 2.4 seconds, right? Now, again, I mentioned these are estimations. So this estimation from web page test, if we go back to analytics, we can see that Google's actual results are showing almost a full second below that. Why? Well, this is an average page load time of desktop and mobile. So that's going to have an impact. It could be the time frame, right? Maybe at this particular time, the website is loading a little slower, right? We don't necessarily know. So again, the key is you'll want to do performance tests on your website anytime there's significant changes. So if you redo your whole homepage, if you redo your website, if you're adding new features and functionality, you should be doing before and after benchmark testing to make sure things are working well. All right. So again, our big improvements here is we took that website from almost 6 megabytes down to 600 kilobytes. That's a significant reduction. And we took their server requests from 59 to 30. So we almost cut those server requests in half. And the page load speed opportunities here are going to be JavaScript because we cut that JavaScript out. We took away all those decorative flying around the page elements, the fancy flyout windows, and we just removed them. And now you can access that content quickly and easily. So this is on my blog. I try to do this for all the websites I launch because I'm a big fan of measuring the work I do. And I want to show clients, site looks great. I want it to look great, but I'm more concerned with performance. That's what I'm paying attention to. Best practices, search engine optimization, accessibility, right? All these things. In the case of GiveBIG, we're going to focus mainly on performance because we want that quick, fast page load speed. See if we can go back here. Still loading. This may not load till the end, and I really like, this is one of my favorite testing reports. I should have run it before we started the meeting. Get out of Pingdom. We talked earlier about HTTP2. This is related to your web host, right? So you can put in your website, and as I mentioned, HTTP2 only functions if you have a secure site. You have to have a secure site first, all right? And then we can go in and we can test it. This is a website called KeyCDN. And if you just do a search for this, you can find these tools online. But again, we'll provide them after the presentation. This is also taking a while. I wonder if more people are testing this morning. I just tested this morning. It worked fine. Let's try a different website. See if I can pull up a different one here. All right, we'll just show it to you on this other website. So for Positive Alliance, we run the test, and you can see here that your web host for Positive Alliance is supporting HTTP2. So that's great. All right. So what that means is that when I'm on a mobile device and I'm downloading those server requests, the JavaScript files, the CSS files, the image files, I'm going to be able to download those like almost 5 times faster. So generally speaking, the browser has to go out and grab the fonts, grab the HTML, grab the CSS, grab another CSS, and it's doing that really fast, like Bruce Lee fast, all right? But with HTTP2, I can grab multiple files and bring them down to my phone at the same time. So it's really important. And most hosts are doing this. So if your host is not doing this, you need to find out why. I've only encountered one host in the last few years that's not done this. Not to say that there aren't others, but it should be generally a function of your host. All right. User interface. So let's use a few of these same website examples here and talk generally about how to prepare for a campaign. If there weren't 100 of you, I'd be curious to know when you all send out your emails for GiveBIG, how many people send visitors directly to your homepage versus a page specifically designed for GiveBIG? Because as we just showed, generally speaking, your homepage is going to be one of the slowest pages on your website because there's often more content on it, right? So a couple things to consider as you're preparing your campaign. Number one, if your homepage has a lot of content on it and it's not GiveBIG related content, think about creating a GiveBIG landing page.
There is one, Scott. Excuse me, this is Greg. Can you hear me?
Yep.
They do get a URL specific that drives them directly to their page at GiveBIG.
Great.
So it would be Washington Gives / and then the name of their nonprofit. So they get that. So
yeah.
I think there's some questions here also, folks, of how they can get their web page to operate better. You know, should somebody go to it on the way there? So go ahead.
And we'll cover some of that. So anyway, as you're thinking of the URL you want to point people to, think about pointing them to a specific page. So if you know, for example, that your donate page, based on your tests, if your donate page loads faster than your homepage, send them directly to the donate page. Create a GiveBIG page that has a donation form on it, right? Anything you can do to get that visitor directly in front of GiveBIG, all right? Generally speaking, anytime you're asking somebody to do something, you're going to improve your conversions if you don't distract them with anything else. So if I send them to the homepage, I have to read through this content. I have to read through this content. I maybe look at these images. I'm not necessarily seeing anything about GiveBIG. So having a GiveBIG landing page for them is a great idea because it's going to message directly, you're in the right place. Here's why we're doing GiveBIG. Here's why you want to support us through GiveBIG now versus later, right? And that very clear call to action. It's going to have a high contrast and be very, very visible. All right. We will look at another one here. So again, a lot of content on this page to shift through, right? I mean, I'm going to have to dig. Generally, no one's going to read through all that content. They're going to be scanning and trying to look for GiveBIG information. So you'd either want to have a GiveBIG landing page or you'd want to have a donate page that's really called out. Now, I like the previous example because the donate page was very clear. It was right in that upper right corner. I noticed it almost immediately. I didn't have to, it was scannable, discoverable right away. All right. So maybe move your donate link to the end and see if you can give it an alternate high contrast color. And or you have a GiveBIG call out somewhere. So this could be a GiveBIG call out, or even better, we have a URL that's maybe called GiveBIG. And when we go to GiveBIG, it would have GiveBIG information. All right. And we'll pull out one other example here. So donations, not bad. I can kind of see it. I'm used to seeing donations in the upper right. Again, a lot of content here. We've got another donate online. So you've got 2 calls to action. That's not bad. You've got a third, it might be overkill, but that's fine. But I don't necessarily see anything about GiveBIG. So would you create a separate GiveBIG page? Or maybe you just send your folks directly to the donation page. A lot of organizations send people directly to their actual giving service, okay? This is okay. I know that this is Society St. Vincent de Paul. That's all right. But you might try to keep them on your site when you're having them do those donations. So you could take this form, and if it was performance optimized, you could embed it on a GiveBIG page or a donate page. All right. And was that the third? I think that was all 3 that I tested there. Yeah. And if anyone has a GiveBIG landing page they want to share, you could chat it and we could take a look at that. All right, so we're going to continue on. Greg, were there any other folks that had offered up? Here's one. Lake City Partners. Nice and clean. Not going to make any comments about that. What I'm happy is that of the 4 examples I've used so far, I haven't seen a content slider. And again, I can't ask everybody how many of them know what a content slider, but if you have a content slider and you're willing to show us your website, maybe chat that to me and I can pull that one up. Yes, the content slider with a pop-up window. Now, maybe this would be GiveBIG. I'm a big fan of only using pop-up windows for time-sensitive material. I wouldn't want a pop-up window to be there 365 days a year. It'll get more attention if you put it up during campaigns. So this is some type of content slider. I don't even seem to be able to really, not even sure if it's necessarily working, but it's rotating through. If there was one piece of advice I could give every website owner to do, it's not to do content sliders. All right. Statistically, content sliders have no evidence that they actually work, except in e-commerce environments and very, very specific environments. All right. They don't really help with conversions. They hurt your search engine optimization. If you're involved with any type of DEI campaigns, they're terrible for accessibility. They slow down your website. All right. I can't think of anything positive to say about content sliders. Designers love content sliders, and I know a lot of you are using content sliders because you have so many, departments or programs, and you need to draw attention to them. There are better ways to visually highlight your programs than content sliders. If a program is so important it needs attention on the homepage, don't bury it in a slider that moves so fast that I can't even see the information. All right. So again, if anyone can share with me evidence-based, conversion-based data that a content slider works on a non-e-commerce site, I will buy you dinner. All right. I've not seen the data, not in 15 years. All right. So ditching this is going to help your performance quite a bit. There's a lot of JavaScript to run these. They're big, huge images. And again, generally, they're not very search friendly, and they do nothing but slow down the site, particularly on mobile. But the site is using SSL, so that's great. That's going to help with performance. All right. Now let's also talk about image optimization. tinypng.com. Now, this is not just for PNGs. This is for any type of image that you need to optimize for your website. Generally speaking, your images on your website should be maybe a couple hundred kilobytes at most. All right. So I'm going to show you an example of a really large image, and we'll show you what it takes to optimize. I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. All right. Just going to pick a random image from my library here. So here's an image over here. You can see that it's 3,797 pixels by 2,848 pixels. It's almost 5 megabytes, 4,000 kilobytes. That's a big image. This is an image you could print on a print brochure, but it's way too big for the web. All right, web images don't need to be that big. All right, so we can take that image and we can drag it over to tinypng.com, and you can drag up to 20 images, maximum of 5 megs, and it's going to shrink that image for web use for us. So look at that final image size. I didn't have to open up Photoshop or an image editing tool. It took that 4.5 megabyte image and it shrunk it to 378 kilobytes, a 92% reduction in size. And then you can just download that image. All right. So when you're uploading images for your website, particularly if they're panoramic, full width images, if they're really big images, and I hope you're not using content sliders, but if you are, make sure you're optimizing those images. All right. Step 2, another trick. This image is actually bigger than most web monitors. All right. The standard desktop monitor has a width of, say, 1440 pixels by maybe 1680 pixels. This image is almost twice that. So just like on your phone, now this is a Windows trick. I'm sure there's a way to do this in Apple, but I'm not sure. If I right click this image, I can click send to mail recipient, the same way you would send an image to someone from your phone. All right. And when I do that, it'll ask me what size I want. And this 1280 size is fine. And look what that does. Again, it takes that 4.4 megabyte image and it shrinks it down to 384 kilobytes. And it's reducing the pixel size, which is great for web optimization. Now, again, I might need to crop it. I might need to do some Photoshop working. Now I can attach that image to my email. And look at the final image, 82 kilobytes. I've taken that image and reduced it a massive degree without ever editing it at all. And I just right click and I save it to a folder where it belongs in my website. I don't have to email it to myself. This will not always work depending on how your email, if you're on Office 365, depending on your network server and so forth. But this is a great way to quickly optimize images for the web. And again, you could do a group of images if you wanted. All right. So that's image optimization. Now, again, remember, file size, that the size of your homepage is roughly speaking about 25% of the page load speed. All right. Your server requests are what drive page load speed. So this impacts page load speed more than this. All right. So one big image, generally speaking, will load much faster than 5 thumbnail images because you're having to download 5 separate requests. All right. All right, what else was I going to go over? Okay, last thing I wanted to cover was website hosting. So most of you are probably on small, what we call shared hosting plans. All right, we'll show you this. I'll just show you on SiteGround, which is a host that I use. So SiteGround is going to have all these various levels of hosting. Unless you're paying $100 a month or more for hosting, you're most likely on what we call a shared hosting plan, all right? And these plans often cost $10, $20, maybe up to $40 a month, all right? Basically, you're on a web host, a computer. It's just a web server, and you're sharing that space with hundreds, maybe thousands of other websites, okay? So the host has to use that one computer to host thousands of sites. And the only way they can do that is to control the resources that each site has. All right. So if you exceed the resources of your plan, 2 things will happen. One, your site will go offline completely. So I had another national client. They were featured in the New York Times 2 weeks ago. SiteGround took their site offline. No notice. They just took it offline. And we found out fairly quickly, and within a few hours, we were able to get the site back up. We had to upgrade their hosting plan. We had to give SiteGround more money. And that is a major pet peeve I have with this particular host. But I'm not sure whether I hate that more than the alternative, which is that your site loads, but it loads in 45 seconds. So web hosts can throttle the resources your computer uses, just like you're waiting for your phone to spin something up. The web host can do that in such a way that your website is still technically up, but it takes so long to load, no one will be able to donate through GiveBIG, all right? And that is much harder to diagnose, and that's why you need to look at these analytics numbers. Because on your desktop, and it's not GiveBIG, your site might load just fine. But what you don't know is how it's loading when 100, 200, 400 people go to it in the span of a few hours, and your host says, oh, look what's happening. We're just going to slow that site down, right? So hosting is a critical part of any organization that wants to drive revenue through significant traffic. And again, if you're a small organization, you get dozens of donors, probably not going to be an issue. But the more traffic you get, the more important your hosting plan is to page load performance. All right. Get some questions here. Again, most hosts should offer a free SSL certificate. Some of you might pay for an SSL certificate, that's fine. Most hosts support free, what we call Let's Encrypt open source certificates. And again, the advantage to that is it does speed up your mobile page load speed, all right? Most hosts are gonna offer 24/7 support. If you're hosting with a friend or someone and it's a one employee type hosting company, I would be cautious. I've encountered that quite a few times. If that person decides to retire, they get hit by a bus, you're going to have issues, right? So I would encourage you to use a host that at least has multiple staff members for support, right? And all hosts are going to sell you on this idea of 99.9% uptime, all right? We'll keep in mind that 99% uptime over the course of 365 days means that your site could be down for days, all right? And they have to do that because when you're on a shared hosting platform, they can't guarantee 100% uptime because they don't always know how other sites on your hosting server are going to behave, all right? So that was a really quick overview of a lot of performance metric tools and issues that impact sites. I don't expect you to be able to solve all those issues, but I'd say the takeaways would be do the analysis, use the tools, use these URLs to test your site, look at the size of your site. Reducing images is a quick and easy thing you can do yourself with most editable websites, right? Replace those images with optimized versions. If there's any features or functionality of your site that you don't need, disable it if you know how. So that for WordPress, that would be plugins that you're no longer using or plugins you maybe don't need. Maybe you just temporarily deactivate them during GiveBIG, all right? And then pay attention to your hosting. If your host has statistics, they might very well show you your resource usage over time. And if you're about to exceed that, or you're getting emails from your web host that are saying you're about to reach your limits, you want to make sure to fix that before GiveBIG, all right? One of the client I told you about that had the New York Times story a couple weeks ago, one of the ways we solved their issue was they obviously get traffic from all around the country, all right? And so when this Times article hit, it was syndicated and people were visiting the site from California, East Coast, everywhere in between. We didn't have enough time to change the host immediately, so we upgraded the hosting plan, which is a quick short-term solution if the host can do that. The other thing we did is we implemented what's called a content delivery network, a CDN. All right, so Cloudflare is one of the most popular content delivery networks. And if you have a domain that's, say, owned at GoDaddy or Network Solutions, you're probably managing what's called your DNS through GoDaddy, through Network Solutions, through Hover, through Dotster. But if you manage it through Cloudflare, Cloudflare can provide a performance boost that can help to supplement your web host performance issues. All right. That is definitely a more technical solution, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everyone, but a CDN is definitely part of the performance opportunities we look at when we have a site that's struggling and maybe you can't change your host yet, or you paid for a 2-year hosting plan. The CDN is not going to solve everything, but it will help. So I left some time for Q&A.
Yeah, there's some questions here, and we can either go through them if you want through the chat, or also people can raise their hands. So, but there's a couple here that are like, the folks just wanted to really learn how to put a widget onto their website that would direct people directly to their GiveBIG page.
Okay.
Any comments on that?
Do we have an example URL I can look at, or person I can look at the chat here?
Sure. There's one in, let's see who's got one.
This one here.
Senior resources.
Senior resources donate.
Yeah.
And you want to redirect that page to this page.
Right.
So you can do that through what's called a redirect. Generally speaking, you'd have to set up the redirect through your web host. If you have WordPress, there is a plugin called Redirection, and that plugin will allow you to redirect content. Now, again, just make sure that this look and feel of this site, seniorresources.org, is definitely different than this one. Now, in this case, wgives.org, that gives me some confidence, and I see your logo here, so might very well be good. I would want to test the performance of this page versus my own site to make sure that was a good decision. All right. There's ways to probably do that through Wix, Weebly, Squarespace. I don't work with those tools, but I'm sure they have redirection tools available as well. Carolyn asked about the size of her current GiveBIG page. I'd have to have that URL to test that.
So the GiveBIG pages that they have, they're within the Mighty Cause platform. They can add lots and lots to it if they want to put videos and pictures and stuff like that. I think that might be part of it. Okay. Which you could use these testing tools that you had. So if you use that, if you loaded your page up with a whole bunch of stuff, what you're saying, Scott, is you could run it through that?
Yeah, we can copy any URL and plug it into any of the tools that we talked about. So right. Any of these tools we can go in, and if you want to test your specific donate page, you just analyze the donate page. So this isn't testing your whole site. This is a page by page test, right? And we can see here decent green numbers, pretty good, this donate page. And then we could also test the other page. We could go forward and we could see what the wgives page loads. And again, this is just one testing tool. I typically use 3. But again, I'm seeing pretty decent numbers on this. Lots of green bars. That's what I want to see. And I would do these, I might do these tests on at least 1 or 2 others. And if I had access to my analytics tools, I would look at my analytics tools as well to see what those numbers look like. We can see here on the site speed overview, you can see here that Safari has an average page load of 2.5, while our average is 1.5. Well, that makes sense because most folks using iPhones are going to be using Safari. And we already talked about the fact that mobile devices are generally going to load slower. So that's why this Safari number is above our average. All right. 501 Commons is hosting the 2-day event. It is best to direct most donors to the main site during the giving period, or do you recommend that we have direct link to our own nonprofit page? I guess it depends on the content that you have up on GiveBIG versus your own site. Maybe you want to provide some additional contextual information that you can't do. Otherwise, you could certainly link direct Hopefully the goal would be once somebody gives, they're going to end up going back to your website, exploring, maybe volunteering, maybe engaging. So whether they're making the direct give during GiveBIG, the goal is hopefully a percentage of that traffic will eventually end on your site, and you want them to have a positive experience. I don't have a behavior tab on my analytics. So good point. We're looking at what's called the universal analytics view. All right. Google is changing to a new service called G4. And that change goes into effect in June of this year. And universal analytics is going to be deprecated. All right. I don't like the look of G4. And I've been holding on to universal analytics because these are the reports I'm familiar with. There are ways to gather that information through G4. I've not done it yet, frankly. I have a colleague I work with. If you need help with analytics, my favorite person, and unfortunately, Marty just broke her wrist. But this is Marty's website. She's based in Gig Harbor, and all Marty does all day long is Google Analytics. If you need help with Google Analytics, I highly recommend Marty. She has packages. She can work up custom reports. Again, this is another feature. If make sure you have analytics installed. And if you have the resources available, working with someone like Marty to help you improve your conversions and measure the results of what you're doing, I think is critical. And my success working with clients is always improved when I'm working with someone like Marty, because she can share real world data of the opportunities for improvement and where we need to invest resources. There's a question here, Greg, about doesn't 501 Commons require to use the Washington Gives page for GiveBIG? Quite possible. Again, as I started early in the presentation, this is not necessarily a GiveBIG specific presentation. This is about any time you're driving traffic to your site. It could be through PR opportunities. It could be an annual fundraiser, a gala event, anytime where you have hundreds of people where you think they might be pushing to your site to either volunteer, donate, get engaged, read an impact report, annual report, etc. So for GiveBIG, it may not be exactly relevant, but I think it's still relevant in the fact that we want to get people engaged with what we're doing. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, Scott, I think that the question here is that we require using the Washington Gives for GiveBIG, and that is correct. For the giving platform, for using GiveBIG, yes, you need to go to that. What we're looking at here is how to redirect people back to that web page. And so Scott's giving a whole bunch of different ways to make your platform, your website, work really well so that you can get people directly to the GiveBIG web page. So yes, you should redirect to, like this one, in this case, that island senior services, senior resources there, that is where they go to, is the GiveBIG page there. So that's correct, C. White. Sorry, I don't know your first name, but yeah, we do require that you go to the GiveBIG web page to participate in the GiveBIG program. So good thing. Other questions? Go to the order. We've got about 5 more minutes with Scott. Raise your hand, shoot a message into this chat. There's folks that also are not the administrators of the websites. They're going to have to work with their webmaster, so to do some of these things and point them out. So I think that Kristen mentioned that she was going to share that with them.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Other questions or anything else for Scott? Please ask away. You've got an expert on running websites right in front of you.
Analytics, performance, image optimization, hosting, content sliders. Don't ask me about content sliders. Do you even give them, does WA Gives have the ability to even have content sliders, Greg?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I've never tried, so it could, but I don't think so.
So we just want to make sure the images on this particular page are optimized. We showed you some tools for doing that, whether it's tiny PNG, or again, you want to use that right click, send to mail. Either of those will work. And if the image looks good to you, generally make it as small as you possibly can.
There's another question from Ashlyn Walker. As she says, in the past, we've used a hyperlink button on our website to redirect to GiveBIG. Is it suggested to do the redirect plugin instead?
I wouldn't install the redirect plugin for a single redirect. I often use them if I'm rebuilding an entire website and maybe, you know, dozens of pages might be changing URL structures. I personally like to know when I'm clicking a link that goes off to a third-party website. If you have a link in your upper right corner that says donate, most folks, I think, familiar with nonprofits kind of understand that it might go out to a site like Network for Good, WA.Gives. I think that's fine. Again, the expectation is when I go there, I should immediately see your logo, your branding. It should look like a legitimate site. Again, for GiveBIG, wagives.org is already going to have some credibility. People are going to be familiar with it. But the more you can kind of co-brand that page to look like your own organization, the more credibility you'll have. I'm not a huge fan of putting third-party links in my standard navigation. I prefer to see those third-party links in like a separate, what I call utility area, or possibly down in the footer. I would maybe expect these links to go to a third party. That's just general usability. To me, and I think many visitors, when I do testing, they would often expect navigation links to stay within the current domain. So the more you're popping people around, the more you're breaking their expectations, if that's an answer.
All right, well, we are right at the top of the hour. Go to the order. Any other questions or anything other folks have? I've got a couple more things I'm answering in chat, or I'll reach out to you separately. But thank you so much for coming, Scott. Any other words of pearls of wisdom here for folks? Anything last? You want to give your information up of where you are, how they can find you?
You can find me on the web. It's Marlow 50. That's like Hawaii 50. I love working with nonprofits. I do also work with small businesses, but most of my clientele are nonprofits. I mostly do development work. I generally partner with branding and graphic designers for the more creative side of things. So if you do decide to work with me and you need design work, I'll typically connect you with one of my design partners or work with your existing graphic designer. But I do a lot of performance optimization. As I mentioned, my blog, I try to, you know, show all the sites that I've recently launched and a lot of, you know, before and after comparisons, because this is what I like to show clients, right? You know, I'm not just making pretty websites. I'm trying to improve sites measurably. And I'll include, again, I can include all those links. I know Greg's going to send a follow-up email and video recording, but I will shoot off all those links, specifically the testing links and so forth we talked about, and as well as some other resources. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Scott, very much for, and all of you for joining us today. We're going to send out the recording a little bit later with everything that Scott just mentioned, all the links. And Danielle had asked about having a best practices using the Washington Gives website. Great. I will take a look into that. And if I can't find something to somebody to put that on real quickly, we'll definitely link to a previous video that we have done, and I can send that out to everybody too. But thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to turn the recording off.